The gleaming beauty of the Opera House sits on Bennelong Point today, just as stunning as it was 50 years ago when it opened. There are various events over this weekend marking the 5-decade milestone. The Opera House broke convention with its bold design and inspired a new era of architecture. Professor Karine Dupre from Griffith University is a registered architect, and she joins us now from the Gold Coast. Karine Dupre, welcome. So when did you first see the Opera House in real life, and what was it like for you to see this building for the very first time?
Oh, I arrived in Australia in 2013 to move here with my family, and it was really the dream for me to go to see this iconic building. And we arrived actually to the building from the botanical garden. And I have to say, at first, I was a bit disappointed because the first thing I could see was only the concrete podium and I couldn't see the tiles. And I was like, oh my God, just all this concrete. But as soon as I went onto the roof section where you've got all those tiles, and then inside where you have this beautiful timber in the different concert hall rooms and so on, I was totally subjugated and in awe with this building. And I can say it's really one of the few buildings that has left me speechless when, walking around and looking it around and appreciating it.
And do you still get those same feelings every time you see it? Because I know I do.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So let's go back to its design in 1957. Was its structure and style a bit of a revolution at the time?
Yes. Actually, when Hudson won the competition, he had a bit of a problem in the sense that he didn't know how to build what he had designed. And he did several sketches, and it's only when he partnered actually with Arup, which is now a very famous construction firm, that together they used for one of the first time the computer-aided design system to be able to modelize and to simulate how the structure could be actually built, and how many concrete, how many arches, how many vaults you needed to create this wonderful shape.
And did this inspire a certain style of architecture that others followed?
Yes, exactly. Because at that time, in the 60s, 70s, you had a strong brutalist movement with a lot of very heavy bunker-like type of building made of raw concrete. And with this building, for the first time, you had something where the shape was much more curvy, where you had a bit of deconstruction. You could imagine the shape even like from a dynamic point of view. And it did inspire many generations of architects. And one today that you can see a big, let's say, similitude and inspiration is, for example, Calatrava. The architect Calatrava, if you look at his work in Spain, in Valencia, is art and science city,
Yep.
You will notice a very similar shape.
And as with any groundbreaking building, there were challenges and dramas over it was a 14-year period. That is generally just how it is when you've got a building like that?
Exactly. And the main challenges were really about the construction, because several times there were some design that were not appropriate. So what happens, for example, the foundation pillars for the roof part were too skinny, so they had to redo them. And of course, every time the community is asking, where does the money go? Why don't we use the money for something else? And it had created many challenges locally because, of course, at that time, many areas in Sydney needed also retrofitting, needed, modernization. And the amount of money that went spent on the opera, it became very difficult for the government to justify it.
And how has the building stood the test of time in terms of its beauty and its integrity?
So the building is now listed in the World Heritage List by UNESCO, which means that it has stand the test of time. And of course, there has been regular maintenance and some that lasted also like more than a couple months. But basically, the concrete, all the tiles are very well maintained. And one thing that has changed, and I think it's normal due to modernization, but the architect, when they started to develop this project, were thinking of using the seawater to cool down the building. And this seawater system with all the pipe was used until 2017. And it's only when there was a retrofitting of the system that they changed for not using the seawater anymore. But I think that shows how long-lasting the design and the engineering were having, those thinking to be sustainable.
Yep. And it's hard to imagine Sydney now if some of those dull finalists had been built instead, because they chose the Opera House just after the judges thought, oh yeah, all the finalists are a bit boring, let's go back to the reject pile. And one judge picked it out of the reject pile, and that's extraordinary how it was chosen. So explain for us just how influential a building can be in shaping the psyche and the character of a nation, and how the Opera House is such a fine example of that.
Yes, so the fact that today the Sydney Opera House is one of the top 3 most visited places in Australia, the 2 others are Uluru and the Great Barrier Reef, show that it has become really a landmark for the country, not only for the locals, but also for all those visitors that back away from Australia have this imaginary about the country. And Sydney Opera is one of these buildings that makes a difference, because not only of the shape, but of its location, really at the tip of a land, like surrounded by the sea, like really proposing something that was not equivalent before,
Mm.
And today, we've got 11 million of visitors per year at the Sydney Opera House, and it does bring almost $1 billion per year, so it's not negligible. This is a real tourism attraction.
And we should feel honoured to have it, do you think, and cherish it?
Yes, of course, because it did also, it did create an identity, for the country. And I think this is part of our past, in the same way that we've got the natural environment with the Great Barrier Reef and the Uluru, but the Uluru is more than just a natural environment. It's, of course, a reference to the First Nation of this country. So the Sydney Opera is about the technology that was set up and that was developed for this particular building. And it's also another important landmark, knowing that in Australia, you've got only another building that is listed at UNESCO. Otherwise, you've got also a bit of the convict site, but only 2 buildings, and one of them is the Sydney Opera.
Great stuff. Okay, Karine Dupre, it's been delightful having a chat to you about this this wonderful building in Australia. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Like the rest of Australia, Victoria is going to need a lot of new homes in the future, with